We're not doing just the hospital. That's
Yeah, I mean, I just assumed it was.
Is that Walnut?
I would imagine, but
It's gonna be a
first pass for the whole thing.
Yeah.
that's exciting.
You got a real cool
My mistake for assuming.
How long
Because I had nobody else
do it?
to
How many hours do you have?
Yeah. Well, no, and I get it, and nobody asked about it.
So it's just different at this point. like,
What would the agenda would say? Review the budget.
I mean, I'm so, right now, I'm so
Oh,
confused.
cool.
It's
Now,
like,
where do you
Totally
get
erased
your
for
wood
your
blocks
thing.
at?
it didn't even cross my mind with all this, you know.
Craig, the agenda would have said review budget.
Right.
It would have been a little silly.
Number one, hospital budget.
Number two,
city budget.
It's totally my bad.
I'm hoping that this regular meeting
The
goes
Osage, that's
Quickly.
beautiful right there.
No, but I really didn't get it either, so that's okay.
I don't feel bad.
No, at this point, it's,
Zebra wood would be beautiful too.
I just, you know,
How
I mean, in all
cool
honesty, I
is
just assumed
that?
that there was gonna be
Neat.
something going on with it, but yet, I mean,
That's
I'll admit,
art.
since mid last week, I've heard nothing from anybody.
And my computer's not working.
So at that point, I was like,
So I was talking,
Now what?
maybe it's,
Okay.
you know,
Capital C,
we
zero,
were talking,
U,
listening,
N,
talking.
C, 1, L.
yeah.
See, it's scrolling. You're in yours?
Like a day or the next day. And he was gonna find out what number.
I
was
don't
new,
know.
'cause there was
I
some
saw that she was out in
uncertainty.
Seattle
I didn't hear
yesterday,
back
so I
from
don't
him
know
until
if she's
today,
back
so I
or
think he
not.
found out the number.
No, Amy, it won't acknowledge my password. Is that because it's not city council time yet?
I don't, well, maybe that's what it, mine's on.
Yeah, because I mean, I
The
had,
password is incorrect.
I mean, I had
Put it
with
in
him
No, I didn't.
at this point, you know, because I mean, he was kind of leaning on it a little bit, and I'm like, I'm not sure.
Capital C.
Caps lock's
I
on.
mean, even though
Ah, okay. Okay, C,
Yeah, me
zero,
too.
U, N, C.
Oh, really?
1, L. So it was the cap locks on them.
I mean, if Scott wants to flip off the administration.
I work here.
Something-
I've peeked.
Is this that
Aside,
place on 585 that used to be that?
aside from Jason and Justin,
Is it?
Used to be Hong Kong.
as a county. I don't know, anybody should be,
King Kong went to
Yes.
Hong Kong to play ping pong.
hey,
And we'll leave it at that.
should, we got the ability to overturn it, and if we overturn it, he shouldn't be PO'd. That's just the
I tell you what,
Charter
that
reads.
China Garden on
Rihanna is.
Oh, Avenue?
Who's
a
opposed to
challenge you to find somewhere
Probably
better.
don't have the votes to overturn it,
It's,
which is just.
it is
that's
good.
just the way it is.
I mean, it's my favorite in town, but it's like,
Your favorite?
oh, of the Chinese places, I
I
think
know
the
Justin and probably
garden
Jason.
on Bell Avenue.
Personally.
But I would say like,
Well, I
it's
can
also,
assure you
like,
that.
we just don't have good Chinese food in Worcester. It's like, Gary says that, it's just rental.
Gotcha. Who do you like?
I would say that's my favorite of the ones in town. I just don't feel like we have any good options here. You know what I mean?
Panda Express.
I haven't either. Apparently,
Say that's good.
apparently my dad went during the soft opening, didn't realize that's what it was, and walked in and they were like, you know, this is invite only. It's just for like the people that help make this happen. He's like, oh yeah, I did your landscape. They're like, okay, what would you like, sir?
All right, well, it's after 5:30, and we've got a busy schedule tonight, so we'll go ahead and start our Finance Committee meeting.
Hey, Scott.
At this point, I'm assuming that Mr. Boyd, we'll just start off with Mr. Boyce to present the hospital budget.
Thank you. This on, or is it on, Amy?
Push the button.
All right. Thank you. And I trust Andre, like he always does, includes the hospital budget packet in budget preparation materials. Excuse me.
Your section 5. Section 5.
So I just wanted to start off by really thanking Mayor Brenneman, who has served as chair of our board of governors since 2008. And I thought it was worth noting that during his tenure as board chair, the hospital has created Bloomington Medical Services in 2008, finished the top 2 floors of the East Patient Tower, opened the Transitional Care Unit, started interventional cardiology, opened the outpatient pavilion, and started our comprehensive oncology service with the James Cancer Network, started our telestroke program with Ohio State, endured the pandemic, purchased the Western Reserve Building, which we now call the Bell Professional Center, which you'll see that we're moving the Wound Center into that this upcoming year, including all those things I've noted. Since he's been chair of our board, the hospital's invested $158,259,000 into maintaining and expanding the hospital with capital equipment and projects and improvements. And the hospital has been named the top 100 8 out of the 9 times that we've received it during Mayor Brenneman's time as chair. So sincerely, thank you for your leadership of our board and for your support of the leadership team at the hospital. It's meant a lot. And the gentleman to follow you has a lot to live up to. So, no pressure. So, and that shameless brown nosing really doesn't get me much, so I'm just going on record, so. So if we could turn to page 1 of the budget packet, which has our really top-level volume assumptions and some of our key assumptions. And as we look at this, just like we try to do every year, on November 10th this year, we had a strategic and budget planning session where we spent a better part of a half a day with the board and going through all the detailed assumptions here, but we also this year had an updated strategic plan, so we try to make sure that the budget correlates with the first step of a multi-year strategic plan. And that the presentation and the packets are reviewed with the board. And then on November 22nd, the board approved both the capital and operating budget. So on page 1, you can see the top-level assumptions that we're projecting for 2024. Predictability in this post-pandemic era, probably for all of our businesses, but certainly for hospitals, has been challenging volume-wise. But with several key specialists that the hospitals have been able to recruit through the foundation, through Bloomington, to our community, we've been able to achieve some volume growth, and we have an additional couple of recruits that we're assuming next year that will help us as we continue to grow the volumes at the hospital. So we believe that the volumes you can see in the 2024 column are relatively close to what we've seen in any given year since 2020. So that shows me that our volume assumptions are realistic and achievable. And I guess it's worth noting that 2024 is a leap year, so we got an extra day of volume that will contribute. In the middle of page 25, we were budgeting 856 full-time equivalents with the targeted wage adjustment noted on row 29. We do need another price increase, and we are targeting an even percentage. And the reason why I do an even percentage is our managed care contract, someone will allow me to go up to that even percentage. So at the hospital, I do some price modeling where some areas have a greater component of fixed fees than others, so I raise those less, I raise others, but we try to balance. But when we look at our price increases and and what we charge our community and the insurance companies, we're very reasonable using Ohio Hospital Association data because all that's public, and we do a comparative, make sure that we're on the low end of those. You will note on row 40 on this page 1 that we broke out the provider relief funds back to 2020, which we've included in the margin trends noted on row 36 through 39. So with that page, you can see the numbers correlate and are consistent. If you turn to page 2, assuming no questions there, we have a little bit more granular look at the budget assumptions by the different areas, and then on the outpatient side. And you'll note none of them are, I guess, wildly high that are not achievable. On page, yes, sir.
Questions during or after?
During, it's fine.
On the page 1, on page 2.
Yes.
I noted under behavioral health, a forecasted increase of 2%. Isn't some of the expanded ER and stuff gonna be somewhat dedicated to that, and wouldn't you expect more of a,
You know, behavioral health is not lacking volume. What it lacks is really capacity to take on the volume of patients. So we brought in a psychiatrist, but we're budgeting to hire an APP to help support him next year, but we're planning on that being mid-year. So the impact of the volume on the ER project, which we're excited about, we come to the Planning Commission on Thursday night of this week, will not finish, best case scenario, probably till December 2025. So some of the ability to,
so there is stuff happening, but it's not gonna affect 2024's numbers?
it's not, so this behavioral health is actually our intensive outpatient therapy and our partial hospitalization program. It's not our outpatient clinic, which is with Dr. Cease under Bloomington.
Okay.
So that's in that fund transfer to the foundation.
Okay. All right, thanks.
No, good question. So on page 3, you can see kind of a comparability of the numbers with our projected 2023. There's really two major things happening on the schedule that are worth note at the 10,000-foot level. If you look at row 12, under other revenue, we received state rescue monies this year, so they distributed that out to all the hospitals. We are not assuming we're getting more rescue money in 2024, so that's the reason for that large decrease. And then the other major change, other than the key assumptions we talked about on page 1, is row 29, where we are budgeting really two things. We're budgeting some operational improvements within Bloomington Medical Services and some restructuring. We're also budgeting to receive the employee retention credit for Bloomington, which we've already applied for through the IRS. So, you hear a lot about that on the news. So we have a fairly sizable expectation to get that about August, September, from a cash flow perspective. I will try that, sorry.
It's getting a lot of feedback that I think might be disturbing.
All right, sorry about that. No.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
This is more of a, for my own education. I know what all the operating expenses are, except for line 16. I didn't learn that one in business school. What does that entail?
So fees,
I know what fees are, but what are physicians and others? What kind of a?
well, some of the fees in there are related to physicians. So for instance, we have a pathology group and we have a medical directorship stipend that we pay to that pathology group. We also subsidize some of our hospital-based groups, including Bloomington Hospice. We have a contract and we pay Bloomington.
So that's where we're
for
paying for our hospitalists and
Yes.
some of the ER
Yeah,
specialists.
so that's when we
and
have a
stuff.
direct contract. Our
That makes
ER
sense.
group, our imaging group
Okay.
is through there.
I guess I just assumed they were in salaries and wages, but that wouldn't be right. They would have to be in some sort of contract. So.
Yes.
Okay,
No,
thanks.
That's correct. So really on the profit and loss, those are the two major swings. We have inflation assumptions in here. We've tied everything out to the volume assumptions. We meet with all our leadership through the month of September to review their volume assumptions, and all this gets budgeted at a cost center level and rolled up at an aggregate system level. And that's what's reflected on this page. If you look at the EBITDA at the bottom, earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization, the percentage is almost spot on with what we're projecting 2023 to end up. So it's not a budget that we don't think is a solid budget to plan for next year. All right, move on. Any questions on that page? So then the last part I was going to cover tonight is the capital budget on page 18 through 22 in your packet. And we really have, let's see here, 5 major items in the budget. One that's in the budget that we went ahead and decided that we needed to get this year instead of carry the dollars forward, which was the anesthesia carts, which we did at last month's board meeting. Most notable in the budget, which you're aware of, and it's part of this planning process, is the patient access and emergency center, which totals $39.2 million in the budget with carry forward dollars and additional dollars that we think we need. Contextually, that's a big number. So contextually, how's that fit? We spent just shy of $37 million on our outpatient pavilion. So when we look back over time and we talked about this retreat, these are big numbers. We have been able to manage those big numbers by have no debt, We save up for the big projects, and we generate the monies to pay the contractors out of our cash flow. So that's the largest one. So we're coming to the planning commission this Thursday night to get hopefully another approval process that then comes up through the city council. The other major item in here is an MRI project. So when we built the outpatient pavilion, we built it with quite a bit of shell space in between the existing hospital structure and our oncology program that we built. In that structure, if you got your COVID vaccines at the hospital ever, we use some of the shelf space to manage those vaccine clinics. One of those large rooms is we're going to convert it to another MRI. And why do we need another MRI? Well, our existing MRI is getting towards the end of life, not at the end of the life, but we currently have so much MRI volume that we're leasing an MRI 1 day a week, sometimes 2 days a week. So we can't keep up with our existing machine, and we run that machine 6 days a week really hard with the staff and whatnot. So we are going to expand capacity in that shell space where we ran the vaccine clinics. Another major expenditure in the budget is upgrading all of our vital sign monitors. And fortunately or unfortunately in our business, it feels like there's a lot of planned obsolescence. So they only support technology for so long, and our monitors are getting end of life from a support perspective, and we need to upgrade them. So that's $1.4 million. That probably won't all finish in 2024, but we need to start that project next year. It's not just the monitors, but it's actually the IT infrastructure that supports the monitoring system. We have a new x-ray room in the budget that's end of life, $693,000. And then the last major item in our capital budget is we need to turn over our IV pump fleet replacement, and the total of that is $464,000. So we're currently looking at multiple vendors, and we're trying to stay on contract with our GPO, because this is a sizable enough purchase that if we fall off of this, we'll fall below the threshold that we need to maintain. So we're working with the vendors that we have available for us. So those are the major items in our capital budget. And I wasn't going to go over any more detail unless you had questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On your very last, on page 22 of that section, there's $300 allocated for house purchase. What was that?
300,000, yeah. We are not aggressively targeted any houses in the neighborhood, but if a house came up, we want to make sure that we have dollars available and be able to react with that timely. So we don't have any specific thing in mind. And the block of property that we would be thinking of, the hospital currently owns 2 right along Winter Street, owns the corner lot that is now vacant when we raised that house there, and then we own the house that the Children's Advocacy Center is in. So there's one house left on Winter Street, and then there's the duplex on Barber Street. That if they came up.
I was just curious if there were any actual plans or anything else.
When we were able to buy College Hill Shopping Center, it sort of alleviated the urgency of that corner of expansion. Any other questions? Goes much better without the mic.
Sounds better. This isn't a question about something that you just covered, I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but I'm curious, I've had conversations with a few people recently who, and I would agree with this, there's a need for more women's health options in the community. Is that something that you're budgeting for?
We are budgeting. We really probably haven't stopped recruiting for an OB-GYN even prior to Monarch exiting the community. It's a huge need.
Yeah.
So we're trying to brainstorm other solutions also, because short of somebody wanting to transfer mid-career, you wait for the residency cycle, which is, ends in June, and arguably we're too late for that cycle from, hiring somebody that isn't already in the pipeline. So we have recruiters, we have multiple recruiters we're using. We may want to expand the number of certified midwives we have. We think that's probably more achievable in the short run to help expand the capacity of the OB-GYNs that we currently have to help them through. We did bring back Dr. John Weeman to help provide some no-doc call coverage so that the team isn't as burdened as what they might be without his help, but it's an issue.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Thanks for.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Scott, can you say Ibn again? Ibn? No, under lumps.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay, well, so we'll turn the show over to Mr. Doria.
All right, Captain and I, Joel and I on the Hammond Ag here. Draw your attention to page 1-2, and this has the definitions of balanced budgets. And typically what we do is we point out that, right, this budget, like most of the other ones, is balanced considering we take our revenues for 2020, projected revenues for 2024, plus our surplus balances equals, they're greater than our expenditures. So what we're doing is, you'll see, I'll point to you later, is that we're using, I think, projected to use about $1 million for fund capital out of, anyway, I'll show you that when we get to that, but I always want to point that one out. Second thing I always like to point out, well, I'll let Joel, do you want to, since it's next in line, you're going to, hit on the personnel, which is 1-6.
Sure, I can do a little bit, we can talk more as we go through the kind of narratives later. So the calculations for positions you'll see is FTEs, so that's full-time equivalents, so that's full-time plus a calculation that takes into account our seasonal and part-time and just divides it by, 20-80 hours per year to come up. So it ranges. There's usually the difference between actual full-time and our full-time equivalents ranges around 20. So what you see, FTEs 202 for 21, 207 for 22, 208. You can subtract about 20 off of that in any given year due to part-time for actual full-time people that are actually here. And I talk about that a little bit more. I guess the biggest thing to point out is there's 3 new positions in the budget. One is an additional HRO, hospital resource officer, and the hospital pays for that. So it's additional in here, but the hospital, we get revenue back to pay for that position. There is one in PPM, a maintenance worker, and that basically completes a 3-man crew there. We've just been operating with 2.5 crews under the roads and stormwater. And back in the narrative again, I can just go there real quick. So if there's any additional or significant variances in any one of the individual division budgets, the managers have put a narrative in to describe what that is. So just to give you an example, in the, it would be on page 1-10. And so there's the third additional is a firefighter, but it is not a 24-hour firefighter. When we did our contract negotiations almost 3 years ago, we were able to get in there the ability to hire just an 8-hour a day, 40-hour a week. We'd only had one of those, and that was our inspector or our fire marshal. So we were able to get that in there, and so this would be an intent to fill that position. It would also be some peak hour coverage, so we should see potentially some reduction in overtime, since our peak tends to be in the afternoon on any given day, so it would be during that normal 8 to 5. And also provide us some succession planning for that fire marshal as well, that's in our system. So that's the one. The other one is the PPM, the maintenance one, and if you go back to 1-22 and 1-23, you'll see there the added position there, and that's 70% out of what we would call general fund and 30% out of our storm sewer fund. So it's split because of the duties of that particular position. can see that does street sweeping, leaf collection, other cleaning repairs, and also will do snow and ice control, and your typical street maintenance, curbs, everything else, pothole filling. So that's what that position will do. Just allows to have that third crew of 3 people in that. So that's really the only changes personnel number wise.
I just, since we were going sort of, or in the budget book order, the other thing I always try to comment on page 1-31, bottom of that page, this all started when we went for the tax increase. We said, hey, well, half the tax raise was like 2.5 million. So we said we were gonna utilize that for capital projects. This is sort of to show that we're being accountable. So in 2020, we put about 4.3 million tax dollars to go toward fund capital infrastructure. And you can see the numbers there, about 7.2, 4.8, 22, 4.7, 23, and I must have a broken link in my sheet because that 2024 should be for about 4,768,850. I'll get that page updated. So there's about 4.8 million this year, or 2024. So anyway, that's just general tax dollars, 4,768,850. I always like to include that, and then let's see what we got here. If we want to just go straight to the general fund, which is located on page 2-6. I wanted to comment on, first, if we look at 2023, what we budgeted versus how we may end this year, there's really, we're going to end revenue-wise approximately 8% more than I had budgeted. And there's really 3 components there. The first component is our income tax receipts, and specifically, we had a record year for business net profits. We normally average about 3.2 million, about 5.5 this year. So that's the big delta there. The other 2 big deltas were obviously interest income, because I don't know if you watched what the Fed did, but they raised rates quickly and a lot. And then the other thing was charge for services. Charge for services was because of a couple of things. One was our AMS services were doing better. And tell me, I can't remember the other one, but so those are those 3 components that basically add that 8%. The expense side, where we did better than the budget. Some of that is, I'll give you a couple of examples. There's some of the capital. If you remember, the chief bought some equipment for drug testing. It was $197,000. We took it out of those opioid funds, so that saved $100,000 in the general fund. The captain Joel had somebody budget for the directors, sorry, for the deputy director's position, so that wasn't spent. So those things add up. And also, again, we'll talk about this, although we're near full employment during the year, you have some positions that are vacant, and that actually, believe it or not, adds up quite a bit over. And then, so anyway, and we also try to be good stewards of the public dollars. So we're going to finish probably down 5 to 7% based on what we budgeted. So again, that's a good thing, which will only add to our. So if you see there, we're looking at the forecast about 32.2 million in revenues under the 2023 forecast on the page 2.6. If we spent about 26.4 million, that would leave us about $5.8 million. However, we did transfer 3.5 million into our capital fund, so that actually puts about 2.3 million back into our days in cash, and so our days in cash will be somewhere around the 245 mark, which is pretty significant. But they'll go down next year. So if you want to go over to the next page, 2.7, you'll see that we're budgeting a slight increase in our revenues. The reason is I can't take a record year in income taxes and budget based on that. So I basically pulled that down to an average year, and I did 3% of that number. However, we are going to see an uptick in our property tax revenues, because I think the average Wayne County increase in property valuations I'm not forecasting 34.9, I am forecasting, I believe, about approximately 25% increase in property taxes. Overall, I think that, you're gonna, we'll see a little bit of increase there, and then,
Andre, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Can I ask now?
yeah, anytime.
Okay, you were just talking about the days in cash.
Yeah,
I know at a previous meeting, I don't know, a month or two ago, you had mentioned that that had dropped down a little bit from where our normal comfort zone is. I mean, I know it's padded, but I think there were some expenses that had arisen that were, does that ring a bell?
no, not being uncomfortable.
No, you weren't uncomfortable, but it had gone down, I think, more than it had in the last several years due to some expenses that had arisen.
I'm not sure.
Okay, it might not matter then, I was just gonna ask
Yeah.
if you could tell me what the.
No,
Are
because
we back up
we're,
to that
yeah, we were,
pre-expense?
yeah, I'm not sure, I don't remember. I apologize, but no, I don't. But yeah, we're
Well, you
doing,
and I are both bad at.
we're doing, yeah, so, anyway, but even, okay, so then, so next year, we're doing the same transfer, 3.5 million to capital fund. So you'll see 32.5 million is what I'm forecasting coming in. We're budgeting for 30.2 million going out, which leaves us with an operating surplus of 2.3. However, we're gonna transfer 3.5 million, so that means 1.2 million we'll have to quote take from savings. And as we've said over the years, we budget for basically nearly, I'll say 99% liabilities. What I mean by that is we budget for all our contractual obligations. We budget for example, we budget $25,000 in Matt's and Chief Fisher's cost center for our deductible for our property liability insurance. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Let's see, so anyway, we budget for pretty much every contingency.
Plus, it's also budgeting for full obligations for full employment. And we're never,
Right.
almost never full aid.
So typically we come in like 3 to 5% under budget most years. And that's pretty typical if you look, I think, historically over what we come.
On the line of employment, just a quick clarification for me. At one point it says that our police force was in full force for the first time in 11 years. And then at another place it says we're short an officer. Is that the hospital resource officer? Is that why?
No, we were fully staffed for about
2 weeks.
week and a
Okay,
half.
so when that was written, it was true.
We're down
It's
now,
not currently true.
Correct.
we're down two.
So you'll have to make an adjustment to the budget document.
Right. I know, there's another one too, like I said, I'm sort of
Okay,
broken.
I thought we were down one, okay.
Yeah.
We were down one, and then about 2 weeks ago, I had another one resign because she and her husband couldn't find childcare.
Okay.
So that fluctuates all the time.
Well, it's just two different places, and I got the document all at once. I know you wrote it over a period of months.
That's true. So realistically, I think a year from now, I don't think I'm gonna come to you and say, yeah, we had to use $1.2 million out of our surplus. But we are budgeting to use that. So
Worst case.
in reality, I don't think that's gonna happen unless, you know, the economy takes a bad.
But even if you did, it would just be half the surplus we generated this year.
Correct. So, I mean, yeah, that's, and then we're still showing we'd end the year with 203 days of cash, which is still strong, because our days are 60 to 240, so. And the other thing I wanted is, here's something interesting, I don't know if you know this, so if you would click down and drill down on all these things, so if you go under what's called, under the expense and the expenditure side, or admin services, there's a cost center there called Worcester City Council. That's where we pay your salaries out, okay? There's a bunch of line items for all your salaries, and then, you guys probably don't know about this either, but then there's a budget for, we budget for training expense for you. So in this year, 2024 budget, there's $5,500 for training expense. There's $750 for office supplies, just in case, because some people on occasion, not too often, have said, hey, I want to go to the OML's new elected official seminar. So, anyway, and then there's $2,500 miscellaneous in case something, there's the videography in here. There's also, I put in $3,000 for each council member, so 3,000 times 8 council members, 24,000 in case you would want to do something else. There's also.
So wait,
We each have $3,000 for 23.
You get more than that in the 23's budget.
We got 20 days left.
This meeting, Bob, you had $3,000.
Right. And then here's the kicker too, that Craig's like, wait, what is this? So we in 2004, we had to do an annexation agreement with Wayne Township. So we have, for the TGS parcel, Noble Drive, all that's over there, there's several parcels there. For 50 years, whatever our 4.2 mills generate over there, we have to pay that to Wayne Township, okay? So normally it was between 11 to, probably 11 to, I think the highest was 14,000. So I budgeted 15,000 in your cost center, and I pay out of this cost center. And Craig's like, well, why are you doing that? And that's a good question. I'm like, that's because your cost center is where all the money goes for property taxes, because council can enact property taxes, council can enact income taxes. So you guys have the most profitable cost center of all city. You get income tax revenue.
$3,000.
Well, so you have the most profitable cost center. So anyway, it's funny, it's never really come up a whole lot, but I thought this year I would say, hey, you know, you guys are really rich. Congratulations.
We're still paying for videography,
Yeah, I think of it, videography services to,
just for like the production.
yeah, and yeah, that kind of stuff, yeah, yeah. And then we also, there's 7,500 for IT, technology in case, I know we have new council members, I don't know, in case your machine will break or whatever.
Someone can't figure out how to log in.
Yeah.
Was that going directly to Amy, or?
Can you take some of the $3,000 from his budget and give it to Amy for helping?
I think we can, we work something out. And the other thing I did want to point out too is, and then going forward, so I don't, when I do the forecasting, like for 25, 26, 27, 28, I don't go off a budget, I go off of what I consider as a realistic forecast. And if you even looking at the forecast with conservative numbers, we're still, it looks like we should fare decently over the next 5 years. And again, unless something crazy happens with our economy or something to that effect, which I don't see that, but the other thing I always tell Bob when he gets a little nervous about the economy, I'm like, Bob, that's okay, because we're always the last we lag into a recession, but we lag into recovery. So it's interesting. So when we see it coming, we can prepare for that. But again, when you're out of it, we always lag out of a recession or lag into a recovery. So anyway, so that pretty decent. So all those special revenue funds, all I did is budget, which I do every year, whatever is going to be available. We don't, very rarely do we spend all of it, except some years we do for the street funds. If there's a project, we'll spend $500,000 for the street funds and let them accumulate up maybe, like the permissive tax fund. So, but I budget whatever is available. I did that again for the opioid one for them. I also, let's see, I did want to hit on the utility funds. So, I mean, there aren't any questions, but I want to hit water fund, which is on page 2 dash, I think it's 56, 2-54 and 5. I did want to point out that we had a pretty decent year revenue-wise. We're going to finish up about 4.5% over our budget for our charge for services. Means we actually had demand higher than what we expected, and I think we can narrow that down. We know who those customers are. Interest income was considerably up because again because the interest rate environment. So we're all, I think our total revenue should be about 5% over what was budgeted. And again, on the expense side, even both our operating expenses are going to be lower than budget, and the capital is going to be considerably lower than budget because we had budgeted a large filtration project, and Mike decided that, you know what, he could actually make it work in the plan and push that off for a few years. So there's going to be a significant variance as far as the capital side goes on that. So that was, and then, but on the budget-wise, I think Joel, I mean, he covered the personnel stuff, but I think Joel will probably, we get to section 3, he'll talk about capital projects as far as the water goes and things like that. Next page is obviously the sewer side. The sewer side, it's somewhat similar in nature. So I think we're about 2.5% over what I budgeted in charge for services. The 2.5 million intergovernmental, I'm sorry, we're on page 2.56. The forecast 2023 versus budget 2023. We had that 2.5 million budgeted, and it's for the Inflation Reduction Act credits. Those aren't going to be until we do the one project, which is going to be probably, I think it's budgeted for 2024 now. So that's why you're seeing zero for my forecast for 2023. Anyway, let's see what's the other side of that. Yes.
I got a question on
Yeah.
page 2.12 before we get. to
Yeah,
the
no problem. 2.12?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the boring.
No.
State highway fund.
Yeah, I like that.
Probably gonna be here.
Yeah.
And it's not, I'm just tracking here when I'm looking at, the fund balance, beginning of the year fund balance, at the end of the year kind of numbers.
Yeah.
I'm just noticing, obviously, the balance at the end of 1 year is the beginning balance of the next year, so you're going tracking across the 228.82, the next year, it's the beginning balance, and 171 is the next year's beginning balance, 115, next year's beginning balance. And then in 2023, we go from 97,000.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense,
To
does it?
233,000 at the beginning here.
Yeah, that's a good catch. That could
It
be.
is the same if you go from 2023 forecast to 2024 budgeted. So there's two lines for 23.
Oh, that's
forecast and
okay.
budgeted,
So, hold on. I have to look at my old.
Oh, 97 goes to.
Yeah. So, but I have to look at my, so that might have been from,
Yeah,
that's a good catch, though. I
I
think.
drew a line over
Yeah, no,
the
that's good.
97, and then it continues to be correct.
Yeah, no.
Is there $100-some-thousand in there that's where we budgeted that what happened, or does it not matter?
No, I'll have to see why it's that high. So normally, sometimes these fluctuate, like these type of funds, normally not this fund, though, it's normally the permissive tax from the state.
Last year's didn't have that, that's all.
Okay, yeah, no, so I'll have to look.
Okay,
That's
it's not a
good
big
call.
deal. Like I said,
No,
it's the
thank you.
state budget, it's
Yeah.
state fund. It's not something we have a lot of control over anyway, so.
Right, but, I mean, there's a formula in there that's pulling from somewhere, so. All right, thank you. Appreciate that. So, and I was saying about as far as the wastewater fund goes, there it is, okay. So overall, our revenues, they appear to be down 18%. That's only because of the 2.5 million we're not gonna get this year. We're gonna get it, but it's just not gonna be this year. But if you pull that out, we're still up 4.1%. So, then the other thing is very consistent with the water fund. Our operating expenses are under budget, and everything else pretty much will be on budget for the wastewater fund. And let's see, I think that's pretty much all I had. Again, Joel will talk about the capital stuff, because there's a lot, again, more capital intensive stuff for those funds. Other than that, I don't know. Let's see, there wasn't a whole lot. The one thing I did want to kind of cover today, which I normally, I don't see a whole lot of, but, so I always like to, like, myself, I like to look and say, like headwinds, what's the potential headwind coming down? I had sent something out to you by email that there's they're having hearings on pension changes, specifically police pension going from 19.5 to 24%, and then I believe OPER's going from 14 to 18%. So that, again, those are some headwinds. So if that would happen, it would impact us. I think I sent out to the tune of about $400,000 for our general fund. And then, so if you top it off, say for example, like a general wage increase will affect the general fund, I believe, say 170 to 200,000. You can round up about 200,000. So, you know, as you can see, that plus 3%, that's significant kind of dollars. So my point of pointing that out is as long as our revenue stream is keep up with legacy costs, we're all good. But these are just things that we have to pay attention to, and we'll have to adapt and react to if they become reality, like these pension changes. And I don't even know how these hearings are going, to be quite frank.
But I think they had a hearing and they had like one change, but I didn't look at what the amendment was, so they're progressing.
And so the other thing I wanted to do mention, I think I mentioned it at one point is, so our health insurance, I think it has about a 9.5% impact on this year's budget versus last year's budget, which I think for our general fund, that's about $320,000. And I think wages were 2.5%, so I believe that would be probably $400,000, something like that. So that's a $700,000 delta right there, those two items. So,
I'm back on
yeah.
page 2-23. It's the Economic Development Fund.
Yeah.
Noted, obviously, we've been over this 100 times.
Yeah, no, yeah.
But this is not about that. It's the budgeted for the next, like, 5 years, right, 224, I mean, it makes sense to me, obviously, income less, or small percent, and it's going to be spent based on the stuff we approved a couple weeks ago, I guess.
Yeah.
My question is, there's at the bottom, we have $124,000 in that fund,
Well,
that's just going to sit there.
so, yeah, sort of. So,
Okay.
well, so some of that, there's some receivables that we'll probably collect. So this was a Worcester Opportunities Loan Fund, there's cash, plus, so some of it's timing. So for example, there's 90-some thousand cash, and there's receivables, say, of 33,000, whatever the numbers are, to make that up, but so there's cash. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use that cash that's already available.
Pay this one.
Yeah, so 1/1, you can actually get these grants out, and then it'll replenish as of years ago. At 1/12, it'll replenish itself, so that's why that kind of is.
It just looks like we continue to have this 124,000.
Right. And
It's actually going in and out.
Yes, exactly.
Happens to be the fund balance when we take the snapshot.
Right, exactly, and there's a chance, yes, that's exactly right.
Yep. I understand it.
Yeah, yeah.
I just wondered if there was actually.
Yeah, no,
something
right.
Left over from when we hadn't doled it out or something in the past. but
No, that's good.
I saw
That's a
this
good question. No,
one.
great question, actually. Yeah, yeah.
Either way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. And Captain, I don't know if there's, if you have anything else to add as far as the fund budgets, but I know the capital's pretty intense.
I think we mentioned this previously on the health insurance. We've been averaging about 4 to 4.5% increase every year. We had it. So this budget for 2024 has an adjustment in it because we were, we're like quasi self-pay. We're part of a consortium, Forma. And we were, over the years, we've been using about $1.50 for every dollar we were putting in. So we were one of the higher utilizers just because of our size. And so they had to make an adjustment there. So that's why. One of the plans was 14%, one was like 8 or 9%. So the average, I think, is what he put in the budget there. And we estimate based on, we don't know exactly which, employees are going to choose which plan, so that we just have to estimate that. So. Apart from that, I was going to go over some capital stuff, real briefly. There is significant capital, again, if you want to go back to page 3-1 as a starter. So we do have some significant capital, but it's primarily three areas. And we'll go through it. I'll hit on some of the other smaller projects. But one of the big ones is Christmas Run Pool. That one, is like around $5.5 million. We had been, providing information over the last 5 or 6 years on the cost we were spending to maintain that pool and repair it, and what a potential new pool would cost. So, yeah, we've been publishing that, and one of the things we did our comprehensive plan. We asked some specific questions in the survey and also in some of our public meetings about the pool specifically and the importance of that, the value of that. And for the most part, the community would like to see the pool repaired. I think we had, out of 5, it was like 3.6, 1 to 5, 5 being, very much want to see the pool replaced versus strongly agree. So, there was I think it was 56% overall said strongly agreed they'd like to have that. So that's why it's in there. Obviously,
I'm sure we didn't quantify or qualify that from the standpoint of we asked who was actually paying income tax as to who wanted to have the pool repaired.
yeah, we actually, one of the questions, I think in one of the groups we had, we put the number in there, you know, if it was this much to repair, or this much, the $5.5 million to actually replace it. Obviously, that wasn't in context of the whole budget, but that, we did ask that question with that big number to see if that would affect people's response to that. But anyway, that's why it's there. Obviously, you guys have approved designing it, but you'll see it again, you know, when we get to that point. And at that point, if we want to, you know, have more public hearings at that time, you know, before you guys make a decision on moving forward on that, absolutely. Get feedback on that at that time. You know, like we did get some preliminary feedback through the comp plan. Which is why we moved forward with at least the design and the replacement of that. But, so that's in there, and then there's some debt issue to pay for that, so there's revenue on that side. So I just want to point out, that's a very large amount. The other large project is the Oak Hill, Milltown, and the intersection. That's another $5.5 or so million for that one. Now, there again, that one has dedicated repayment. We did issue some debt, but the dedicated repayment is the TIF funds for that. So it's a large initial outlay and debt, but we have dedicated repayment source for that. The other large items, you'll see that down at, it says sewer lines engineering, which is basically the sewer type projects that engineering manages with our utility department. So that is some of the projects at our wastewater plant that are pretty large projects. Now, there again, we've got some ARPA funds that go towards some of those. We have some grants. We actually have some grants that aren't in your budget. You won't see that we're applying for right now. So those could potentially lower the amount that we end up spending. The other one is what Andre said, that $2.5 million. That potentially would be a reimbursement grant when those projects are done. So we won't see that till the end of the project. So they're big projects, but they have some pretty significant repayment or potential grant to reduce the cost. The other piece of that is, and I'm pretty sure we didn't really budget for this, some of those are part of the process where we were getting revenue from third-party waste and septage, up to about $1 million or so a year. So I'm pretty sure we didn't budget the revenue in there, but those get back up and running. We should see that revenue in future years as well.
I didn't budget that.
Right, so that's not in there as revenue, but we should see that in future years. So if you want to go a little bit further back, just a couple of items on the equipment side. So we separate out the equipment sort of from the capital infrastructure. I just want to point out a couple of large items. I think this is already on your budget. That's the HVAC chiller replacement for City Hall, $260,000, bond at 3.2. So that's a pretty large project. Replace the chiller out back. Hopefully fix some of our issues we have here at City Hall. You will see at the bottom, 3-2, at the bottom of 3.2 is where the HVAC chiller replacement is. 3-3, I just want to point out the bottom there, PPM, quite a bit of equipment there when you add it all up. Just things getting to the end of their useful life, a dump truck, a sewer jetter, and a bucket truck in there. So I just want to point out some pretty large things. And then, there's no questions there. Anyway, if you get to the bottom of 3-5, you see total capital equipment type is about $3.3 million in total for all of our departments. And then when you go over to 3-7, that's when you get into the actual infrastructure, and there's the Christmas Run pool you see there, $5.5 million for 2024. There again, that has to come back. You guys have to approve going out to bid on that. The other big one, 5.2, is actually Oak Hill, Milltown. That's one of the other big projects. We have our typical asphalt resurfacing in there, about $1 million, and then using our money from the state to leverage some additional funds for paving there. At the bottom of 3-9 are those wastewater projects, WRF. And you'll see basically two phases there and then a third phase, or 3 phases there. And that's where you'll see the ARPA for 800. What you won't see is the potential grant money that we're gonna hopefully get back at the end of those projects. And you don't see the revenue that we're gonna get from when you do the biogas, biosolid system upgrades as well, so. But just a couple projects really bumps up that overall capital that we have going on this year. Section 4, you want to flip there, if there's any questions. Here's where we have sort of our 5-year equipment, where we have them, the managers do a 5-year projection. And just a couple of things to check, to point out. You'll see on the fire side, they do have a smaller engine for 2025, 650,000. So the thought there would be we could start that process this coming year, to get the ball rolling, and hopefully they would be willing to put something, get it close to production, try to cut down on that lead time. Hopefully this one wouldn't be as much of a lead time as the big one that we're doing right now.
So what happened to the replacement of fire truck 134?
Fire truck 134.
The last line item on fire?
I think you just forgot to put that out at the end, there.
It still needs to be done.
Yeah, at some point out in the future, so the main point is just to try to look ahead and see what we've got going on, over the years. Try not to bunch everything up in one year, if we can do that, so.
Put it over here. 30.
The other big one is, see if I can find it here, the Christmas Run pool house, bathhouse renovation. That would be tentatively 2025, so hopefully, we can do more renovation and less reconstruction and keep that price down. That particular cost would be mostly a redo of that, and I'm hoping we can just do a renovation of that in the future.
So realistically, though, all the work that we're proposing at Christmas Run at this point is going to be close to $8 million.
If you completely rebuilt the bathhouse, yeah. And I think we can get away with just renovating that. That's the worst case scenario for 2025.
We just upgraded that bathhouse, 2-3 years ago, so it's still in decent shape. It's just how the whole thing lays out, whether we'll be able to use it as a bathhouse for a new pool, so. But yes.
Well, I would hope, based on how much we're spending for the design people, if we're asking them to utilize that as part of the design, that they're gonna be able to do that. But that's just my silly logic.
Part of what we just want to point out is there is a bathhouse there that we'll have to either renovate or, reconstruct in the future.
Well, the Oakley Pond cleanout, that's a public pond?
Detention pond.
It's a detention.
Oh, okay.
Detention pond, yeah.
I was thinking of one I know that's back there on private property.
This is the one right by where the two roads,
Yeah.
Oakley and
Oakley and Brookstone come together.
This has been what, now the second or third time we've done that in the last 5 years?
Yeah, there's minor cleanouts that happen all the time, but yeah, every once in a while we have to do a pretty major dredging, pull out all the sediment.
Leaves and debris.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's how EPA wants it to operate. The intention is to collect all that stuff and then have to maintain it, dig it out later so it doesn't wash downstream. So it's doing what it's supposed to do, but it's not cheap to maintain that, so.
I just say one thing, Mr. Chairman, before we come to closing, I don't want to forget number one, I'd like to thank all our employees, our team that have helped put this thing together. Everyone here worked on it. Talk about being good stewards. Sarah Lynn every year comes to me and says, hey, the cheapest binders are this ugly color or that ugly color. So it's the laws of supply and demand.
I like it.
Okay.
You didn't let us down again this year.
So.
Well, wait a minute, whose budget did this come out of? Because
That
we have
comes
all
out of
this
mine.
money up here.
That does come out of her budget. Put us on this
Okay,
budget.
good.
Thank you,
Fine.
sir. And so, and the other thing is, I'd like to thank Bike Dyke, Kevin, and of course, our young Warren Buffett here. Miss you guys, and be looking forward to you two and your new rules. And the other thing is, you know, Bob had a lot of nice, or Scott said a lot of nice things about Bob. And what he didn't say is that Bob had to put up with me, Sig, and Benson for how many years? And now he's got these two to be to put up with. So you can tell he started with a full head of hair 16 years ago.
That's
So,
all.
right? Sorry, I had to get that out.
I'd like to make one quick comment. I make sure I do every year for the last 11 years, at least, that it's a mosquito. I read the department manager's written summaries. I'm sure if I was the manager, I'm like, oh God, I gotta write this again. I would begrudge it myself annually. I mean, I'm sure that the chief of police, the fire chief, that they're like, okay, here we go again. I do read them, and I wanted to say thank you for doing it. It is helpful. So even though it's probably not your favorite thing to do every year, I appreciate it.
And they're definitely helpful when, we start this process back in September, in October, we're going back and forth a lot on just what are our goals for the budget, what are the goals for next year, and a lot of that comes out in those narratives as we work through the budget.
Well,
So,
actually, I'm going through the financials, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I'll go back to like fire, like, oh, okay, they did tell me that, so it saved some of my stupid questions. I know you got some of them answered tonight, but I appreciate what they do. I do want to say thank all those guys. Hang on.
I know we're out of time, so I won't go into detail, I'll just point out, one of the things we added last year, we have the 10-year infrastructure plan in the back that just sort of lays out everything, put together by all our managers getting together, Public Works. We added the large facilities, so we've already talked about some of this stuff in the pool, but we have enough facilities, it seemed like it would make sense to pull some of those out so you could just see where those are at. If nothing else, it puts it out there, gets it in front of you, that, hey, at some point in the future, here's a facility we might have to address, just so it's not catching anybody by surprise. So those things could move a little bit, but we wanted to get that list out there of all the large facilities we have, like even Freelander Pool, Knights Field, those kind of things. So just want to point those out.
Any questions from council, finance committee? All right. All right, well, thank you very much, administration. This was, as always, very helpful, very insightful, and we'll consider our finance committee meeting closed.
Do we need a break before we jump into laws and ordinance? Yep.
Technology for mobile.
You're on the clock, Scott.
I was just gonna get you more water.
Yep. Since you're back, I did not get some right now.